Okay, so we are officially into episode number 2 of the ENR show, and obviously the whole purpose of this show is to talk about things going on at ENR, and what better to talk about than summer camp being the end of August, which we just had, and joining me to talk about summer camp, none other than our camp director, commissioner, also known as Justin. You guys are going to see a lot of interviews from this exact setup later in the future where I basically realized we're just exposing everyone's real names. So if any kids are listening, they're about to get a lot of inside scoop. But how are you doing? Are you drained from the summer? You just look like almost tired. Not like dead, but you just look like this is exciting to go home.
I actually feel less drained than I thought I would. To be honest, the team out here did an amazing job this summer. They really stepped up, and we had a lot of staff, which helped fill a lot of roles. And and just the summer camp schedule here at ENR, finishing on Thursdays instead of not Thursdays, finishing on Fridays instead of Saturdays was huge. So we just had a full day and a bit to rest, and so just took advantage of that as much as I could, and we took advantage of that as a staff as well as we could. And so a lot of things that we thought were going to be a lot more stressful in transition between different camps and stuff that we were running ended up being really great. And I mean, if you're watching and you're a parent of kids, you've probably heard your kids talk about camp already this summer. Hopefully. And how awesome. Yeah.
Hopefully they went home and
talked about it in a good way. Yeah. But I feel like the staff did an outstanding job this summer, and that really helped me not burn out too badly this summer. I don't even feel burned out. To be honest, I'm excited. This is literally the second last day of camp for me. And I actually am feeling like I probably need one day off, and then I'm ready to ramp back up and go after the things that God's got for us this fall. So,
oh man, I just can't believe it's over, because we got brought on around the same time, October, November of last year. And it was, all right, let's start this. And then it kind of felt like it came super quick. It seemed what is it? What would that be? October to June, 6 months or so?
Yeah.
7-8 months. Seems like a long time. But it just goes by so quick. And then all of a sudden summer hit, and I was like, okay, camp will, it'll feel like 2 months, whatever. But it went by so fast.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even feel like I was out here for 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny environment at camp, because it's I say this to staff all the time. Every day feels like a week out here. But then you get to the end of it, and it's like, what the heck just happened?
And then every week feels like a day.
Yeah, at the end. But when you're in the middle of it, there's just so much happening, because it's such close community and heightened experiences. And so when you're in the middle of camp experience, it's just oh my gosh, this day is agonizing. I just want to get through it in some ways, when it's a hard day. But when it's great days, you're just living in the glory of that great day. And but now at the other end, I'm like, whoa, that was fast. And here we are. And I'm so thankful that we're feeling good. The staff rested really well this summer, and I feel like I did a pretty good job for the most part of doing that and catching up when I needed to. And I'm feeling good. I mean, I've got 2 little kids, so it's not I'm already used to not a lot of sleep anyway. So.
Yeah. Overall, how would you rate your overall experience, or I guess just excitement or happiness of what happened this summer? Or do you need another debrief week after debrief week to really think about that question?
No, honestly, I think everybody their first year shoots for the moon and just hopes for the best. And that's what the approach that I took was hey God, what do you want for this place this summer? And I felt like he said some very specific things, and some things I just really desperately wanted to see happen. And a lot of the ones that I wanted to see happened, and all of the things that God said would happen pretty much happened. And so,
wow.
So I can't really complain in that, I feel like the goals that I set for this summer for this place were super ambitious, and a lot of them were met beyond my standard and my expectations. And one of them being the culture of staff out here, which you were here for 3 weeks, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But the staff culture out here is amazing. It really turned out better than I expected. And I just feel so honored by the way they honored me and the culture that I was trying to bring into this place for this year. So
yeah, you one word to describe you is definitely ambitious. When you shoot for the moon, you shoot beyond the moon and land on the moon. And some of the stuff we were doing in prep, I was like, how are you expecting this to get done? And then it comes out and it's like, whoa, it happened. And I was super impressed with this because I'd never been to summer camp before, never worked at a summer camp before. So I didn't know what to expect. But the way this camp was run was just like fantastic. So
Thank you.
You do really know what you're doing.
Yes,
like parents, he knows what he's doing.
Oh my goodness. No, it's actually really funny. For those of you listening, like Zach works in the office and just explaining a lot to him and stuff. And then, so he came out basically for a day or something like that.
It was supposed to be a week, like 1 week, because it was a busy week. And
he came out for Energy 2 to kind of help. And then basically ended up staying 3 weeks in a row because he just couldn't get enough of camp life.
It was awesome.
Yeah. So that's pretty honoring and humbling in itself to have somebody be like so pumped. And there's a couple staff that were here for like 1 week periods that are like, I'm coming back next year the whole summer no matter what. And I'm like, all right, like that's awesome. That's what I want to hear, like the staff experience. And then campers felt the same way because of that, right? Like when you have staff that really buy in and are really like all in for the culture and for what God's doing. And then campers are like they're seeing the staff bought in and they're bought in because their staff, the people they look up to are bought in. So
yeah, and you've brought up culture a couple times and specifically staff culture, and that was one of the things that kept me out here. Was I'll give some credit to you, credit to God for bringing the staff in, but the staff members that were brought in was like, it was amazing. It was such like, it's so many different types of people, but it just pieced together to form this puzzle, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool, like that whole process. Like I'm new to Medicine Hat, like really new. And so I didn't really know anybody. So I just kind of hired a bunch of people that I did know. And then, but like, I think I actually only really hired one person that I knew before the summer or before this fall. There's only one person I knew of that I knew I wanted to bring on 100%, and that was Ashton, whose camp name is Kona.
Right.
She was the only person. She was the first person I talked to, and the first person I hired. And she I'm so thankful she said yes in November, and that she came back for the summer because she was in Kona all year at a YWAM DTS, and that was literally the only person that I knew of that I should hire. Everybody else, I'm pretty sure everybody else applied online, or the Lord told them to come and talk to me about a job. And that it was like crazy. Like I begged some people and it didn't work. And they were like, no, I'm not coming. And then later the Lord told them to come and they came.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. Like it was just like, I didn't know anybody. I was kind of hoping for the best. And we ended up with about 40 staff out here for the summer, and kitchen staff and some maintenance and facility people that came out to just volunteer the whole summer. It was crazy. It was awesome.
It was really awesome. Yeah. Like I said, part of the reason why I did stay the full 3 weeks. And obviously, like circling back around to culture, I've known you before camp and worked with you in environments before camp. And that's one thing you're really big on, is creating a culture and creating an atmosphere. And you really try to drill that into place. What do you think, like, the number one key, or maybe there's a couple, into building a good culture is? Like, is it the people you bring in, or is it the culture you create that kind of, you can bring anyone into it?
Yeah. I thought about this a lot over my short ministry life. I've been in ministry for 8-ish plus years. But I grew up in a ministry home, and just seeing the drive for culture from my parents in their ministry context, and realizing a few things. Like, you can't make a culture as one person. You just can't. So you actually do have to hire people that are going to buy into their culture. And I learned this in a school I was in. Shout out to 10,000 Fathers in the U.S. It's a worship discipleship.
Do you know
school.
all their names?
All the 10,000 Fathers. Yeah. No.
Shout out Jim, Rory. They all taught me something.
Yeah. But they talked about this idea of bringing in people of peace, like when you do discipleship, to disciple people of peace. And people of peace are people who listen to you, they love you, and they actually want to serve you. They want to honor you. And so that was key, like bringing in people who I felt like could do that. So there's a few people that I did, like as they approached me, I felt like the Lord had put the right people there that they already did that. So our assistant directors are two of them, like Thomas and Cheyenne Smith. And then eventually Shelley and Byron Egland, who are our prayer intercessors for the summer. And all people who I could really feel like were going to back me this summer. And I felt that about Ashton, even though I didn't really know her. Yeah. And then the people that came along because of those people, like, ended up really being a part of that. And so knowing that culture is formed by a number of things, but first of them, it's like culture can only form through more than one person. Like you can't create a culture with one person. It has to be
buy-in.
Yeah, there has to be buy-in, and there has to be groups of people that are willing to go after it with you. So they have to back your vision. They have to back how you're going to achieve that vision. So like vision casting is a huge thing as a leader, and saying like, this is the culture we're going after. This is what it's going to look like. It might seem like it's going to be really hard, but we're going to go after it together, and having them bought into that. And that comes from servant leadership and just showing the culture through yourself. But you need people to buy into that first. So I did bring out like a few people that I really felt, and when we were hiring, especially leadership positions, putting people in like on our director's team, like Simone, who is our program director this summer, Bambi. She's a huge one too, that just really backed me. And I knew that I could have in my court, and she would like back me in prayer and back me in the culture that we're going after. And that really helped too, because she was in charge of everything fun and exciting at camp. But she's also just a spiritual prayer warrior. And so that like is huge in that. So bringing in the right people to start the culture and to project the culture is huge, in your leadership team. So something that we do as a church, I know we're talking about ENR, but as a church, like that was a huge thing for us as a church, was our staff culture was already ingrained, because that's all of us lived that way, you know, because your parents are the lead pastors in our church. And so we lived that way, and it's not hard to create a culture after what we live on, right? But if you don't have anybody backing you and anybody also living in that cultural mindset already, then you can't really project a culture when you're trying to teach people it just takes so much longer. So to bring in some key people that can really run after the culture with you. So that's one thing. So the right people in a leadership position that are people of peace, people who are going to love you, follow you, and serve you, okay, or honor you. And then like enough of those people to make an impact. And then the second thing, I lost my train of thought. The second thing is vocabulary. That's really a huge culture forms. And I talked to the staff about this summer, actually, like when we did our staff training, like culture changes the words that we use, and the words that we use change our culture. Yep. And so in every part of the world, like every language, it develops as culture changes. So the example I use with our staff is like how the dictionary adds new words every year. Yeah. And I'm sure people could like come up with words offhand, but like the words that we use and how we use them as they change and develop is a depiction of culture, but also it forms culture as we use them. So things like that's sick. Like we would say that a lot when I was a kid, but that, you know, that doesn't mean anything good. In the beginning, like that meant that you were literally ill. Yeah. Which that word got changed too after we started using the word sick. But
now you're the illest.
But then, so that kind of formed culture, you know, like we start using, sick, ill, you're the illest. Yeah. It's like, that's kind of weird. Like that's a really weird, but it is. So outside of culture, that word doesn't work. Yeah. Right. Outside of the culture of people who understand what that word now means, because now it's a change of meaning. And so you have to kind of understand that. And so even at camp, like we have cultural words that people outside of camp or have never been to camp would not know. And so we talked about that. Like we really decompressed that as a staff in the vocabulary we use as Christians and talking about the Bible. And then the vocabulary we use around camp that just creates a unique culture here of excitement and fun and all these other things. So things like, you know, we use short forms like CYOA, which is actually called Choose Your Own Adventure. Like that's like one vocabulary word that would fly around camp that people outside, if you just said CYOA, they'd be like, what the heck is that? Right.
Yeah. I've used it since in my everyday life.
Oh yeah. You're going on your own choose your own adventure every
day.
Seriously.
We were actually, so I was on some of those motorized or electric scooters downtown, and I was with two other people, and two of us were in front. One of us went this way, and then one of us went that way. And the person in the back didn't know where to go. And I literally just like naturally instinctively was like, it's a CYOA. Like you just choose what you want to follow. And I was like, whoa, I would not have used that if I never came to camp.
That's awesome. Yeah. So things like that, like, or like even, so we do this on the first day of camp, like the first night of camp, we tell kids, and every time the first day we talk about what that actually means. But that forms a culture because like there's this unique vocabulary you use in this place. Mm-hmm. And then even the other thing that we did this summer, which you wouldn't do in real life, but in camp life, it really adds to the culture, is camp names, which is you introduced me by my camp name. And that these are like things I've picked up on in a lot of like leadership stuff. But like a lot of the way I designed camp was based off of the camp that I grew up at. and the camp that I spent a lot of time in. And so even the phrase CYOA, like that's an Ontario Pioneer Camp thing. And in the Muskokas, shout out to OPC, or InterVarsity Pioneer Camp Ontario. That's what it's now called. And that's something that marked me when we worked there, was like this idea of renaming people. And it really did kind of like create this crazy culture, and people by their camp name, and you don't actually know them by their real names by the end of it. And then you're like, but that the helpful part of that is like, we've kind of said this, like the intensity of camp, you go in, you're kind of hoping for God to do something, or you're hoping for the summer to be good. But what happens is you get into this intense culture that's really, everything's a heightened experience, which is why it feels like a week and a day when you're in it. And what happens is you grow a ton, and you're not the person that you were at the beginning, at the end. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about camp names is like when you name somebody like that, like you actually identify them as different than when they came in. And so when they leave, you're identifying as who you know them as, which is a great leader, which is a humble, servant-hearted person, which is, a steady person to like ear to listen to your problems. Or, it's not the 16-year-old or 15-year-old kid, 16-year-old kids really, and over, that are like the high school students of the day. You don't feel like you're talking to a high school student when you're talking to a camp counselor. Why? Like, because God's changed them and the experience has changed them. And so the cool thing is we actually get to identify that, and then outside of the culture, what's going to happen, which people haven't experienced yet, is what I'm excited for, is they'll actually be reminded in their heart. And this isn't like I made this cognitive understanding before this, but just as I'm processing this season, in their heart, you are actually going to remind them of who they were this summer when you call them that name. So when I call you Sparkplug outside of camp, this is you're going to then have this memory of who you are at camp, who God's called you to be, what you actually developed in, and the things, like, I know you had a radical time at camp too, like where God really worked on your heart. Yeah. And so it's actually going to call that out of you outside of this place. And so, when people started calling my camp name again, which is Commissioner, it called out of me the seasons of leadership from the past. And now it's going to have this new season of leadership that I've just developed in this season, that when people call me that name out of camp, it's going to mean something totally different. And bring that back to the surface in my heart and my mind of who I actually am. And the cool thing with this staff is like the massive amounts of development in all of them. Like everybody has changed like 100-fold greater than they really like came in, and they're totally different people. And that's going to be so cool, because now they're going to be called these names like Shakespeare, like, like so random, and like, like Sparkplug, like I don't know, Bambi. It's like all these like weird, Archer,
Aspen,
Katniss, Aspen, like all of these names, right? Like, but they're going to be like in their hearts, they're going to be just pulled up to the surface of what happened with God that in that time, and who they are now because of it. Or maybe if they drift a bit, like, or if they shift and something's different in their life, it's going to call that back to the surface and remind them of what God's done and his faithfulness and his goodness and what he created them to be. Because a lot of them really discovered their calling and their identity as loved and children, but also as leaders and capable. Yeah. And so that's like kind of the beauty of like renaming people and it becoming so ingrained in it. Like it's this whole nother level of just memory activation of what God's doing in this place. So yeah, so that goes along with like culture forming. Like that's a huge thing. Before the summer, I can't say that I thought about it necessarily like that. I just knew of it as this reality that like this other side of things with naming is you're giving people a new identity. And that's what I kind of processed it as with the staff. Like we're giving you a new identity for your service here in the kingdom, in camp. And it might be so silly, like it might be a silly name. But at the same time, like we named an LIT sandpaper this summer. Yeah. But it actually like identifies them in the season a little bit. Yeah. And they also have now this opportunity to like redeem that name. And in this space, kids who come back here every year, as long as camp names are still here, kids will be looking forward to being a part of that culture because it's so unique and it's different, and they'll be looking forward to like getting their own camp name one day. And it'll also like give them memories and a legacy of these people who were just called these random things, but like created this, like Bambi will forever be the first program director with a camp name ever in this place. Really? And so it's like, at least that I know of. And so she'll be like like she will literally be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
established, are you thinking?
Yeah, something like that. But like, you know, where it's like she will kind of be this like icon in camp history forever now, right? And like, and that's kind of cool because it's kind of this like somebody to look up to for future generations. Like, oh, do you guys remember when Bambi did this? Or do you remember when Sparkplug came out and he had his hair purple and slicked back?
Oh man, we gotta bust out those pictures.
You know, but like people will always look back on those moments and like call that out, and like that would be like an icon, you know, in the future. It'll be, like just a legacy. It'll be a legacy at camp. You know, we're creating a legacy here, and that helps add to it because there's just this kind of like random thing. Because anybody could say like, you know, Todd or, you know, Brandon or something like that. It couldn't mean anything. But if
shout
only
out people
one,
named Todd and Brandon,
seriously. But if only one person ever in the history of camp is named Bambi, they will always know Bambi.
Yeah.
You know, if there are only one person named Sandpaper, they'll always know who Sandpaper is, and it's just this huge memory recreation. I don't know. Anyway, so it's really cool.
I don't know if I've told you this story, but a week ago or so, I went to a Mavericks game, the junior baseball team in town in Medicine Hat, and I was walking in the concourse or outside the stadium a bit, and from behind me, I just hear Sparkplug, and I turn around, and it's a kid. It's his kid with his eyes like so wide, like he just saw a celebrity, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I've never been just recognized like this.
Yeah,
and then I just like I gave him nucks, and then he was like almost starstruck. And I was like, wow. But then that also like made me think that, not that I'm reckless and stuff, but you really have to control how you conduct yourself and how you act in public, because you're someone who these kids look up to.
Yeah.
And it's just, you'll forever be that, because they'll forever remember you as, you know, whether they're cabin leader or they're, you know, they play games with them or whatever at camp. So it's just... Yeah. It was honestly kind of a humbling experience, because it was like, wow, I was just at camp for 3 weeks wearing silly costumes, and these kids, like I've made an impact on their lives.
Yeah, you changed their lives. And like that's the cool thing about camp is like 1 week will literally change a kid's life. Like whether they accept Jesus into their heart or not, like whether they accept the gospel or not, like the impact we create in a culture of excellence and a culture of love and compassion and empowerment, like the things that we really went after in this place this summer, like that creates an experience for a kid that is unlike any other, and they have that in their memory trigger. Right? Like it'll always be in their memory. And again, the camp names will just be an addition to that. The cultural things that we did with these silly words that we use, you know, like like those things will always be ingrained in their mind and be a memory trigger for them to bring them back into that experience and remembering you with slick back purple hair, wigs, or you know,
horrible.
Puffy coats and weird baby hat.
That was so
like
gross to my hair. I try to take very good care of my hair, and that just set me back like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Anyways, I think like it's so cool that you had that experience, because like it's kind of beautiful in that moment to like that you recognize that like the impact you made on a kid was so drastic, like so dramatic in that 1 week of time with them, that they actually would like look at you like a movie star almost.
Yeah, right? I know. I was like, oh my gosh. Like obviously not calling myself a celebrity by any means, but it's just, that's probably what it feels like. 'Cause I feel like that's the reaction I'd have if I saw an NBA player. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like really cool. 'Cause it's like that is really cool. 'Cause they looked up, and I think like all of our staff did a really good job of this summer. Like they're going to look up to them for the right reasons. Like they're going to look up to them because these people, like literally I can say like we were, you know, hand in hand cleaning poop off the ground this summer, you know, or
literally,
like, you know, there was like for sure more than one moment of people, you know, cleaning up pee in the middle of the night for their kids, you know. It's like all of these things.
I love how those are the two examples you think of.
Well, like kids wetting the bed and stuff. Like that's a reality, right? Like,
yeah, it's true.
You know, and I had said this at the beginning of the summer. It's like you're not going to not catch me plunging in toilet this summer. I did it.
Yeah.
Like I did it with the staff only here. Like it's like that's a reality, and it's not because, you know, but that's part of the culture too, is the servant leadership idea that Jesus modeled for us, right? Like getting on our knees and washing each other's feet, and like not complaining about it. Like, I'm the camp director, but this is not my, like, I'm not going to go, oh, this is not my job. Like, I'm not going to plunge this toilet. It's like, no, if anything, like, you know, it's too bad that the toilet's plugged, but like, I want the next person to come in here and have an enjoyable experience, and they don't want to have to plunge somebody else's poop. So if they don't want to have to do it, I'm going to do it for them so that they don't have to do it. Right. And that's the kind of the culture that we like really went after to create, was like, if we're going to really love people well, you're going to do things that you may not want to do because other people will not want to do them either. And you're going to love people through that action beyond what they'll even know. But like, you'll also be loved in the same way. And in close community, you just have to like kind of bear with each other in that, and like love each other well like that, and honor people well. And that's really the culture. That word honor is like really key.
Yeah, that's going to be a great segment to clip, the bathroom talk. But not only was it a good culture, but it was a healthy culture. I've been involved in so many different I guess things, teams, whether it's coaching basketball, being in ministry, working jobs, and a good and healthy culture isn't just about when things are happy all the time and everyone's ecstatic and everyone gets along, because that means more than anything you're just pushing stuff down and suppressing, because we're humans. Like, disagreements are going to happen, stuff's going to happen where, you know, not everyone agrees and they start to butt heads. But a healthy culture brings those up, and it confronts them in ways of trying to find a solution and not just to call each other out. And you've done a very good job at that. And I've developed a ton of friendships out here, and I've talked to everyone at least once. And that's like one thing. Okay, I've talked to everyone probably at least more than once, but that's the one consistency I hear from everyone, is how well you did at confronting, whether it was mishaps or conflict, and just facing it head on, but also facing it very calmly. So big credit out to you from everyone. I've heard that from a lot of people.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge compliment. Conflict is one of those things that nobody likes to do, right? And
I hate it.
I think if people just start realizing that nobody actually wants to do it, but if you would just do it, like Jesus said, if you just go to your brother face to face, because he's not talking about going on the phone and calling them. He's talking about getting face to face and just talk with them. Mm-hmm. It would just shift so many things. And I've heard this said so many times, but like, I really believe 98% of conflict would be dealt with if people just went to each other humbly first.
Oh, yeah. So. Well, and that's how I feel like I've grown in conflict, because I used to hate it so much because I used to see it as like a battle. Like, I used to see it as I got to prep myself up and think of some comebacks or things they're going to say. But if you literally go in fully admitting your faults and your goal is to find a solution, conflict actually isn't that bad.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's, you know, during staff training, we talked about, I had a segment with both our leadership team and our staff, our cabin leaders. Excuse me, burping from drinking Zevia.
Nice. This is just a
camp
disgusting episode.
No, poop, pee, Zevia burps. Trying not to make them gross, so my wife doesn't get mad at me later for embarrassing myself. Okay, anyways, it's probably gonna happen regardless.
This is all staying in.
Perfect. Yeah, no, like that was one of the things I spent a lot of time on, and like probably like too long. Like, some of the staff probably felt like in the moment, like, this is agonizing, get on with it. Like, I don't want to talk about conflict anymore because it's a hard thing to deal with. But most people just don't actually have the right training on how to lovingly deal with conflict.
Yeah, no,
and
for sure.
How to deal with conflict in a godly way. And so I really like, I give all the props to Michael Miller down at Upper Room for the sermon that I preached to the staff here, because a lot of the teaching came from his talk. And you know, I was able to actually be in person when he preached this for the first time at Upper Room. And it was like just mind melting, like changed my life immediately. And it was at the front end of 9 months of conflict I had to deal with in my ministry time at that point in time, and with one of the people in ministry with me, and it was 9 months of conflict where they refused to basically talk to me at all, even after trying to deal with them, and so it was like it was a really interesting, like, it was like God was poignantly teaching me how to do that, like, spoke so clearly to my heart about how to deal with it, and then I had to live that for 9 months. And so that, like, the teaching comes out of that, and then my experience in conflict, and that teaching just hit it so on the head. And as I've dealt with conflict in that way, it's become a practice that I have to do, because I know that it's the only way I know how to deal with it effectively, like 99.9% of the time. So addressing the conflict kind of head on, but not coming just like right away and just pouncing at it, but actually just one of the things I talk to the staff about is like, you need to, like you said, own 100% of the junk that you have to own in this.
Yeah.
Because the reality is Paul says in Galatians, like, be careful that you, like, when you're bitten, that you don't devour each other. And people just kind of glance over that. They miss that. And what he's talking about is like, when you get bitten, like when somebody bites you or like attacks you or says something to you that you're offended by, when you devour them in your spirit, it's like you're chewing on and making building up a case against them. Like, that's a massive thing. And then what ends up happening is you bite them back on purpose. And so the reality is like, most conflict happens in somebody's heart by accident because that person didn't actually mean it, but likely you have a huge part to play. Because if they're biting you, they've probably bitten them first and you just don't know. And so you have to go to the Lord. And so that's what I taught them, like, go to the Lord and ask him, hey, God, what is my part to play in this? What did I do? And even if you did nothing to instigate it that you can think of, you need to go to the Lord and say, what did I do after that? How did I react? Was I reactionary and like poorly reactionary and barked back at them or bit back at them in the moment? And, just because I was offended or hurt by what they said, and owning that. And even if it's just like, there's something that you could have done to prevent it that you realize in them now that you could have prevented, you can still apologize for that. And you're not owning stuff that's not yours to own. So I'm not saying like just coming up with crap that's not actually existent. But actually going back and analyzing the situation and saying, you know what, I probably could have talked to them sooner about something. That was my mistake. That was and I can apologize for that. Even if that's the only thing, right? Like, if you can come into a situation owning your stuff, it really deflates the frustration and anger because you're coming in willing to apologize for things already and your spirit's ready for that. So the first thing is you come into the situation owning all your stuff. And the second thing is asking God to see them how he sees them. Because as soon as you have God's lenses for them, Jesus was filled with compassion, the Bible says, so many times when he healed people. And one of our staff pointed that out. Like, it's like a couple times, I can't remember which gospel as we were reading through this summer, that it was like every time he raised someone from the dead, it poignantly says, and Jesus was filled with compassion, and then he raised them from the dead, basically. And so it's that eyes of compassion of the person. And for me, I gain compassion by trying to gain their perspective. And so just going after it with the perspective of like, what did they think in the moment? And then how does God, reminding myself, like, if this is how God calls what he calls me, like a child, a son, adopted, he calls me a priestly saint. Or sorry, that's the same thing. A royal saint, right? A royal priest. And if those are the things that he calls me, he calls them that too, because they're also his children. And so just coming in and saying, okay, I have to have compassion and eyes to see them as God sees them, and for me, it's just trying to gain perspective of how they might be thinking. And then, and that's just because I think about those kinds of things a lot. For most people, it might just be asking God, what do you think of them? What do you think of this person? And then let God tell you.
Yeah.
Because that's huge. When you hear God be like, oh yeah, like they're loved. Like they're my special child. They're my, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, if you don't weep at that, like, you should go to the Lord and get your heart checked. Cause like every time I do that, I'm like, whoa, okay. And then you're really coming in humbly. Then you're really coming in with like, oh my goodness, like I'm actually here to do exactly what I'm called to do, as Paul says, to the ministry of reconciliation, which I know is kind of out of context, but the context is more about reconciling people to Jesus. But I really believe that we're also called to reconcile each other to each other, because that's how you live in unity with each other, to reconcile. And reconciling might mean that you see things differently and you walk away peacefully. Yeah. Anyway, so I could go on about that because I love the topic, because it's something that really has grown me to understand how to deal with conflict. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
Sorry, just like a long tangent.
Slip and slide was pretty fun, eh? No, that was really good. Oh man. One other thing from talking to people, and then even myself, as a common theme amongst the staff this year, is just walking in faith and saying yes, and then just letting God go, and feeling incapable, but still saying yes and just watching God work. How have you kind of seen that in summer, or in planning for the summer, in you and what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, like, I knew that I was going after ambitious numbers of campers here. And there were some weeks we made it and some weeks we didn't in terms of registration, which obviously you and I have talked about a lot, because you and I kind of handle that stuff. But the weeks that we had an ambitious amount of campers, we needed an ambitious amount of staff.
Yeah.
And so I ambitiously hired as many staff as I could possibly do. But literally, the people in the office, they know this. Like they're like, Justin, okay, we need to know numbers. We need final numbers. We need final names for summer grants. We need all this stuff. And it's like a week before camp starting. I'm like, I'm going to finalize that. Like I'm still working on it. Whether you can believe it or not, I'm still working on hiring staff because it's like 5 days before I'm out here. I'm like, okay, just give me till like the end of the first week of staff training.
They don't need to be trained. They just need to come in for week one.
Like literally I was doing that, and we ended up hiring people literally like the day of me coming to camp. I'm hiring people.
That's awesome.
And Faith just being like, God, we need these people, so you're bringing them. The first day of staff training, like there were some staff that had thought that there could be out here, but they just couldn't. And so that shifted. And so I lost a few staff that were thought were coming. So I'm like, Lord, please bring these people. And there's positions that I felt we desperately needed that this camp has never had before. Like, so section heads is another weird term to go back to vocabulary, but it's the person that's in charge of the section of camp, and they really oversee. So section heads specifically are for cabins and campers in the boys section and the girls section. So we had a boys section and a girls section, and as the camp grows, that might develop into more sections. But for now, like I felt we desperately needed it as oversight to the cabin leaders, and because their real big job is to be a huge buffer between the people. So we're going into that. Doesn't matter what the section head's about, but that's just anyway, so that you guys know what it is. And we had a girls section head, Ashton, the first person I hired, and we had no boys section head. And it's staff training. We have no boys section head. And we're up here as a director's team, like literally pooping our pants because we're like, what are we going to do here? Like literally we have nobody. And I keep talking to the boys, and I keep saying to the cabin leaders, the boy cabin leaders, like, yeah, like when your boys section head gets here, like we'll deal with that with them. Yeah. And like literally like all staff
it's a good
training,
way to kind of
and literally because I felt like the Lord said we needed these people. And so I was like, okay, Lord, I don't know who they are. They're not here yet. And this is a big position. And they're not here yet. So what's happening here? And I just felt peace during the week. And sometimes I felt a little anxious, but I felt peace for the most part that person was going to come. But it was literally like, it was an act of faith to in faith say, no, boys, when your section head gets here, he'll help you with this.
Yeah.
He'll lead you in this. And I'm literally looking at them like, I don't have anybody on the line. There's somebody that I think is going to be that person, but they said no already 6 times. So like, I don't have anyone in the line. And then literally the first day, opening day of Tykes camp, 10 minutes before Tykes camp starts, Breaker is like, finally, I say finally, because we've talked about this and we laugh about it now, but finally in the moment, Breaker was like, it's 10 minutes before Tykes camp starts. And I call him over, and registration is going to start in 10 minutes. And I'm like, so what's the deal? Are you doing this or not? And he looks at me, and the Lord had talked to him that morning at church, and he's like, yeah, I'm in, let's go. And I was like, thank the Lord. Hallelujah.
And he was so good at it.
Oh, he was amazing at it. He like everything I had hoped for in that position, and really like stepped up to the leadership position in amazing ways. And, but that was an act of faith, just like, okay, Lord, we're going to need this, because when 90 campers are here and there's 45 boys running around with not enough staff to cover them, they're going to need somebody who's a support system to them that can just really love on them and pray for them and be there and be a buffer between them and the cabin leaders. And so I knew it was such a vital role, but everybody was just kind of like, is this really going to happen or not, Justin? And I was like, I don't know. Ask the Lord. Like, I got nothing. So yeah, I'm like hiring staff members, literally changing positions the day of the first day of camp registration starting.
Nice.
Faith moves. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that
seriously.
answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally. That was awesome. And that was like me, where I honestly, even heading into the first week, I came out here, I don't want to say disgruntled, but just not necessarily thinking that this is going to be awesome. I'm doing it because I feel God's telling me to, and I'm just saying, I care about this camp, so I'm going to do what it takes to help it. And then, yeah, as you said way earlier in the pod, I got to Monday night because I came here on a Monday, or maybe it was Sunday. I got here Sunday night. Anyways, Monday night was like the first day, and I was like, how is it only Monday? Like, I'm here for 5 more days. And then the days just got more and more enjoyable, and my heart turned, and I was so excited to minister to the kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing that kept me out here, was just seeing how much you can impact these kids' lives and minister
Yeah.
to them. And then, just the staff culture and the friendships, that all added on. And to the point where I was almost not ready to go, but I felt like it was my time to get back into the office and start working on some stuff again.
I think your bosses felt that way too,
Yeah,
probably by the end of the day. But not that you weren't working while you're out here, because you were doing a lot of work while you're out here.
It was so busy.
It was crazy.
But it was really good. We're basically in what feels like the last week of school, where it's just the staff here, and it's just you're ready. Everyone's ready to, not necessarily everyone's ready to leave, but we're preparing to step out and leave in a couple days. Are you thinking about next summer already, or has that not even crossed your mind? Like, you need how players in a sport enter the off season, they say, I just need 2 weeks of nothing and then I'll start prepping for next season.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't help but think about the next season when you're in the season that you're in a little bit. So things like when you make a mistake, like on the opening.
Next year, it'll be different.
Yeah, seriously. Like the opening day of Energy 1 camp, and there's 90 campers and parents out here. For whatever reason, this has not been my experience in Medicine Hat. And please don't be offended by this, but I'm just going to say it straight. People don't show up on time most of the time, especially in the church world. So when we said registration was starting at 3 p.m., I expected people to kind of like come in around 3 o'clock. And it's 2 p.m. and my staff are just showing up, and kids and their parents are here ready for registration that starts in an hour. And I'm like, I don't know what to do in this situation. So anyway, so that was our biggest week, was 90 campers. And it's 3 o'clock. We start registration at exactly 3 o'clock, which is awesome. I'm pumped. I'm ready to go. And 90 campers, like probably not all 90, but like the majority of campers and parents are here ready to register. So I line them all up. We're ready to go. We're starting to go through things. And then we get through the 10th person and we realize, like, we don't have all of the cabin mate requests. Like, there's a significant amount already. It's 10 people, and we've already noticed that people are asking about this, and we don't have it. And so we're trying to make shifts and shifts and shift. And then, like, literally 90 campers, and I kid you not, 80 of them had made requests. And we had none of the requests.
Oh, man.
And it was just an administrative hiccup. And thank the Lord, the majority of parents were, like, really, really good about it. And there's some mishaps, but at the same time, like, the majority of people were great with it. And I can understand, because it's like you're sending your kid, you want to make sure that everything's organized. And this seems like a big oversight, which it was. And we fixed that detail for the next week of 60 plus kids. But that was like something in the moment where I was like, this will never happen again. I will never make this mistake again. And I was always make sure that I am the one, like, that I'm making sure that data is there so that we can make good decisions. Because we pray about which kids go in what cabins, but like camper requests are a part of that too. So anyway, so like you can't help in the moment when you're making mistakes, is what I'm getting at, to think about the next summer. Or when you see a camp counselor do amazing, like, I don't want to name names, but like there's some kid, like some staff here, I call them kids, but they're awesome. They're adults now. And I look at them, and they're such different people from when they came. Like kids who are so shy and unable in interviews to like make eye contact and talk to me, who are now so outgoing, so like good at honoring and serving people. They love people well. You saw them pray for people. You saw them care for these kids. You saw them like just be so intentional. And you're just like, that person deserves an authority position next summer. And so you're thinking in your mind about those kinds of things. But in reality, like, besides planning the dates for next summer and making some shifts to those while we were going and having those ready to go for next summer and just thinking about that kind of stuff, we did do a debrief during this week a little bit. But it's always healthy to take some time out and come back to it again with some space between it. So so I'm doing a little bit of planning, but it can't really be as big. You know, the planning that I'm doing is, okay, I'm doing these things ahead of time. So things like we're planning on releasing early bird registration early, like really early.
How early?
Like November early, if we can.
November.
So
get ready to register dates. Your kids.
That's right. Yeah.
In November.
And early bird registration will start November if we can. We're going to try and we have to figure that out. But those are things that I can't even sort out 100%. But my hope and our prayer is to start things like that early enough that people can have that in their mind way back even in November of this year for next summer. And things like just planning major key roles, like if we don't have our assistant directors or our program director back or something like that, like praying with the Lord and saying who could take that position this summer, and start talking to them this summer about thinking about taking another position next summer because they're ready for it. And with another year of growth too, they'll be even more ready for it. But beyond that, you can't really do much. I don't think, like, you can't, we're not planning themes for next summer. We are debriefing like what worked and what didn't work here in Alberta and in this camp, and what we did that clearly did not work, and how can we make that better. But I'm not making any big shifts necessarily. Like, the other thing too is, because everything's so brand new, you can't really say something worked until you try it enough times that people buy in, right? And so there's a huge amount of buy-in this summer, but there's some things that we'll need more buy-in, like we'll need another try at, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll get there. So yeah, so that kind of stuff goes through your mind, but like it'll be good to take some rest and like just relieve my brain of thinking of summer camp, because it was a huge build-up this year of like, I've never been a camp director before.
Yeah, for real.
And like just getting ready for that and being like, okay, God, hopefully this goes well. Like, and then letting it ride out and seeing it happen, and then be able to then with fresh eyes in a couple months, like look back and sit with some of our key staff and debrief that. So we will do that in a couple months from now too. But
that's awesome. I'm honestly super pumped for next year. So if you're a parent listening and you're debating about sending your kid to camp, I promise, like, it's amazing. If you're debating about applying as a staff member, I would do it. Like, literally, I said, I work here, and I just wasn't super pumped about coming out. Like, I was just kind of whatever. But then literally I was here, and I couldn't get enough of it. It's so worth it. I'm already psyched for next year. It's just so fun.
Yeah, it was a really fun summer. Like,
really fun.
Like, I'm just so thankful that this week even exists too, to be able to just sit with the staff and like build a relationship with them again. But man, like the environment out here is crazy. It's so awesome. Like, the Lord is really here in this place, and the fun that we had this summer was just, it's awesome.
It was
really
great.
good.
Well, I'm sure this pod will see a lot of you in the future, especially when key dates come around for summer camp. But
yeah,
I appreciate you taking some time out of what could be your rest period and your rest week to hop on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, bro. I love you.